I want to welcome you to the first program in our 2024 Sawtooth Forum and Lecture Series, brought to you by the Sawtooth Interpretive and Historical Association, or as we like to call ourselves, SIHA. I'm Lynn Gray, the Executive Director of the association. And before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that here in Sawtooth country, we're in the unceded and traditional lands of the Agaideka and Dukudeka bands of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. We pay respect and honor to the tribes and all indigenous people who have continuously stewarded this land for generations. For over 15 years, SIHA has been bringing professionals to the Valley to present on a variety of topics. This program is free of charge thanks to our primary sponsors, Redfish Lake Lodge, and the McNichol family in honor of Roland McNichol, who was an avid series attendee and a steward of the Sawtooths. We thank our sponsors for their continued support. As you may know, the association is a member-based nonprofit, and our mission is to protect and advance the natural and cultural history of Idaho's Sawtooth and Salmon River country through preservation and education. Our operations are funded by donations, grants, memberships, and book and map sales in our bookstores located inside 9 ranger stations in central and southeast Idaho, the Redfish Visitor Center, and here at the Stanley Museum. We hope you'll consider supporting the work that we do by making a donation tonight in our Sawtooth Bowl over there, or by becoming an annual member, and then you get to learn about programs like this. Would any of our current members in attendance raise your hand? So many! Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your support. We appreciate you. So we are honored to kick off our 2024 series with a forum that we're calling Women in Wildfire, presented by Jolie Pollet, Melissa Wegner, and Sam Cluff, who is actively working on the Bench Lake fire now. So quick biographies of Jolie and Melissa. As the program manager for the Department of Interior's Office of Wildland Fire in Boise, Jolie leads strategic efforts to reduce wildfire risk and promote wildfire resilience. She previously served as the Fire Planning and Fuels Management Division Chief for the Bureau of Land Management in Boise at the National Interagency Fire Center from 2004 to 2022. During her 29 years in wildfire and natural resource management, she has held roles with BLM, Forest Service, and the Forest Service in Alaska, Utah, Oregon, and Colorado. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Geography and from the University of New Orleans, and a Master's in Science in Forestry and Wildland Fire from Colorado State University. Welcome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Melissa has worked in wildland fire since 1989. Every step of her career, from hotshot, fuels, prevention, assistant, and fire management officer, has been challenging and needed stepping stones in a path to where she is today, the geographic area training representative for the Northern Rockies. Paying for school was the impetus that brought Melissa to fire, as it is for many people who start in fire. She holds BAs in Public Administration and Technical Fire Management. Melissa was a secondary education teacher in a remote village of Grayling in the bush of Alaska, and her career in fire has been primarily with the Forest Service, but she's also worked with BLM's Alaska Fire Service. And Sam, who is not here this evening, I'll just give you a quick rundown of what you would have heard from her, a slightly different perspective. She's in her 3rd summer working as a seasonal firefighter, and it's her 2nd season working on the Sawtooth National Forest. She attends Western Colorado University, where she's pursuing a degree in physics, and she is active outside of her academic life and holds leadership positions in a variety of clubs and organizations, both at the university and within the community. So unfortunately, like I said, Sam isn't here with us, but if you will join me in welcoming Jolie and Melissa to this. So we are going to start, like we do many of our forums, with just a series of questions. And so I'll ask a question, and they each will have a chance to answer that question, and then we'll move on. And then there should be time for you all to ask them any questions after that. All right, great. How'd you get into firefighting?
Well, let's see, how's the sound check? Sounds all right. Okay. I have a little bit of, I think, a unique pathway. I grew up in New Orleans, and not in majestic mountains like this, but I had got a bachelor's degree in geography, and then I worked at Tulane University after my undergrad at University of New Orleans, and then I saw that grad students made more money than I did, so I said, well, I better figure out what I'm going to do next. And I'd been out west a couple times in college and really loved it, and applied to Colorado State University, where I could apply GIS remote sensing skills to wildland fire management. But it was all DOS mainframe, and before mice were invented for computers. And I got there in May of 1994, and if you're a fire person, you know that 1994 was kind of a really big year in wildland fire, and especially in Colorado, and that was the year that we had 14 firefighters die in the South Canyon fire. So my professor really got into fire behavior studies related to that incident, that tragedy fire, and needed some help, and so I pivoted out of GIS and remote sensing and into fire behavior. So started working on fire behavior studies with him, and then a couple years into that, Forest Service, as part of the review from that tragedy fire, they were, Forest Service and probably Department of the Interior, were ready. They said, we want to professionalize the fire service. And so they were trying various ways to kind of get more skills into wildland fire management. And they said, well, how about let's take someone who's studying advanced degrees in fire management and teach them to be a firefighter, rather than taking someone who's a firefighter and teaching them or getting them, educated, or more formal education in sciences that probably aren't even related to wildland fire management, as you probably can talk about. But so I got picked up by the Forest Service on the White River National Forest, and for those of you who know Forest Service jargon, that's in Region 2, and started on engines, hand crews, heli-tac, and just kind of went through the whole thing of working on fires when I wasn't doing planning work inside, and just really fell in love with it. And I think my original interest probably came, I was always interested in the environment and ecology, and I always did love coming out west, and I have to say I just go back to New Orleans for visits now, so and really good food. But it's been just an amazing career. It's brought me to great places to live. And I'll just make one correction from your note. No, it's fine. I've been in Boise since 2014, so it's been 10 years. Before that, I was in Alaska and Utah, Oregon, Colorado. Yeah.
So my name's Melissa Wegner, and I did also grow up back east. So I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and so when I was 16, my dad sent me out to Montana, almost to the Canadian border, to work on a hay crew, because I needed to get straightened up a little bit. So I worked that entire summer bucking bales at 16, and it didn't take me too long to figure out that I was the only one that was not getting paid. And so that did straighten me up. And so I went back, finished my high school education, but really what that did when I was on that hay crew was make me love the mountains. And so while I was college bound, that's when I started to be able to pay for being able to continue in college, was to work on first an engine at Tally Lake in the Flathead National Forest, and then with the Flathead Hot Shots for 4 years, and then the Bitterroot Hot Shots for 4 years. And so that fire that Jolie talked about was 1994, South Canyon. Yep, had a number of my friends, that were killed on that hill. And so pivotal, but my first project fire was the Dude Fire in 1990, and a number of firefighters, and it was an inmate crew, doesn't matter because they're all firefighters, and a guard were killed on that fire. So that was my first project fire. But that didn't scare me away, and so I continued on, you know, through. I got a couple degrees. One of them was in education as well, and my dream was to then go to Alaska and teach in the bush of Alaska. I did do that, but I kept coming back down to the lower 48 to work fires. And while I loved living in the bush, I loved, it was an Athabascan Indian village, grailing on the, about 350 miles up the Yukon. And, but it just didn't sing to me the way that fire did. And so then in 1998, I came back to the lower 48 and stayed, and that's when I started my permanent fire career, you know, and moved on through a number of different jobs. I've hired a lot of people. I've overseen a lot of crews. I continue to work on incident management teams. I don't go out as a division. The last time I went, I'm 55 now. The last time I went out as a division was when I was 50. I was like, you know what, this is for the younger people. and so, but do I still love the job? Yeah, absolutely. And I love all that goes into it, but more than anything, I love the people. So that's how I got into it. It was really the people. Well, it was my dad straightening me up. And then it turned out to be the people.
All right, so if you can think back to your first season fighting fire, anything that stands out to you, what was it like? Any memories of that time frame?
I don't know. I'll tell a little bit. So because it was a little bit unusual for me, I was already working for the Forest Service, and I was doing a lot of planning, and I was writing, at the time, prescribed natural fire plans, which was plans that you developed so you could allow natural ignitions to kind of do their thing out in the woods. So that was a lot of fire behavior modeling and you know, things like that. But I would always go out, and when the engine needed another person, or the hand crew needed people, or the helitack needed another person, I would go out on those assignments. And it was always, and like Melissa said, it was always about the camaraderie and the teamwork and getting dirty, as I was telling her over here, and just having a really good time and having a sense of accomplishment. And anyways, that always kind of kept me coming back for more. I never have worked like in a primary fire operational role. I've always been more on the sciencey planning side, but I helped out. I would go on fires. I remember one of my last fires in Utah was, you know, pregnant and busting out of my fire pants, and thinking this is probably the last one for a little while. But it has always been just a great adventure, and just, you know, so rewarding, and loving the showers at the end of those assignments has been great too.
All right, so my first fire season was 1989, and it was a much different time back then than it is right now. And so, meaning that there was very few women that worked in fire, you know, at that time. And so you had to prove yourself, and you weren't necessarily accepted. Well, you weren't accepted. Let's just put it that way. And so that made it tough, you know. But I was paying for college, so I was like, for 3 months I can take anything, you know. But there was really fun times too. Like, I learned a lot of stuff, like how cold beverages could stay in a creek at the bottom of a burn unit. So, you know, so we're dragging fire down a burn unit, and you're getting to the bottom. It's probably dark by that time, because at that time, you know, these are logging units, like old-time logging units where everything is slicked off. It's grown up a little bit, and you're burning it so that you can plant trees, or the silviculture crews can come in and plant trees the following year or 2 years later. And so, so that's the reason why we're burning, is to grow more trees. And after logging, and so we'd burn these, and it takes so long to just baby it down, you know, so that it didn't rip up and burn trees that you didn't want to get burned. And down at the bottom, you know, like, there's this treat in the creek, you know, and it's really cold, and I was like, well, who's the, you know, good fairy that did this, you know? Well, we had some really good bosses, and yes, we worked hard. And the crews that are out there are working equally as hard. You know, that doesn't change as far as the times go. But back then, you know, I was I was not accepted as easily as others were, but I think over time I proved myself, and it was a lot of fun. It was really a lot of fun, and I got to learn to run a chainsaw. So I've never done that in Wisconsin.
Never did that in New Orleans either.
Yeah.
So that's maybe a great segue into thinking about how firefighting has changed over the decades, and experiences you have, or things you have seen as you've moved through. Do you want to go first? Sure.
So firefighting has changed a bit, where it is more acceptable to back off, and we call it the big box, because firefighting is a very risky business. Aviation firefighting is a very risky business, and there's no fire on the hill that's worth any of our lives. But it happens, right? And so then management decisions have grown over the years. And so when I say big box, I mean, so in my perspective, this is ground operations. It always was 1 foot in the black, anchor and flank. You know, you're coming right along the black edge all the time with, you know, your chainsaws and digging line. So you're following that fire, and sometimes really close, like really close, like burning your, you know, like my hair's coming out of my hard hat, you know. Yep, you know, and it's curling up because you're that close. And it's not just because, you know, like you're so dumb you're so close to the fire, right? It's because the wind shifts. You know, the wind isn't always going in one direction, so the wind shifts, and that can catch you, you know, and you know, you back off, but now you've got black flecks, you know, of where the embers burned through your Nomex, you know, but it didn't burn it because it is Nomex, which is a fire retardant material. So so that's how it used to be all the time with every fire. It is like that often with fires still, you know, because you want to keep them small, you know, you're going very aggressive with it. But some of the fires that you're taking a look at, you're like, you know what, we can do it a whole lot easier if we back off to this ridge. Or there's a fuel break here, and we're going to use that to our advantage. And so this, I'm going to call it strategery. That's not a word, but it's my word. It's a Melissa word, you know. So there's a lot of strategery and, you know, brilliant minds that are helping with long-term planning of how to fight fires. And the strategic operations that go into those decision points, decision-making, or to the decision makers, let's say that, is a lot more thoughtful than it used to be. And I will say, and I'm going to qualify with this, as I've grown up, you know, so I used to be, you know, the ground pounder, right? So I didn't know who made decisions. I was just told what to do, and I did it. And so now as I've grown through my career, you know, and I've gotten to work with people all along, I get to see how much people care about the people that are taking the risks. And so that's, I'm not saying that that's any different than when I was a ground pounder, but it is different, you know, in the thoughtful process. It'd be like, and you know what, we just don't have a good decision right now. You know, we just don't know what to do. It's okay to just wait, you know. And I think that's a big advancement.
Yeah, and at least, you know, my experience when I started is that there were, fire was a collateral duty for a lot of people. It was not really a primary job, at least in my experience and when I started. And over time, it's really been a professionalization and a focus, a specialty in a sense of the workforce in wildland fire management. And it seems like that's been a shift, and it had to be, because you know, each year we're breaking new records with largest fire in this state, longest time we're at planning level 5. You know, lots of things. The fire environment is changing. Most number of houses burn, most expensive fire ever. We're unfortunately breaking new records every year. And so it has to evolve, it has to change. And the other thing that I would say that's gotten a lot more notice and attention is kind of firefighter wellness, or you know, mental health, physical health. A lot more awareness about smoke. Not that we know what to do with this yet, this information, because you cannot wear a respirator on the fire line, at least not the way they're currently maintained. But we're recognizing that there's a lot of mental health needs, and it's part of it's because you're gone. You're away from your home for months at a time. Fire seasons are lasting a lot longer than they used to, and so there's a lot of focus and understanding about what kind of resources are needed by firefighters, and I think the resources are starting to get there on the ground, but I know that there's more that can be done. Obviously the pay issue has been a really big deal. It's been in the news a lot. I know there's some looking for some remedies, but there's nothing permanent that's been approved yet. Congress has a bill right now that maybe will pass that will have some permanent pay increases for wildland firefighters. But there's people out, I'm sure, in Stanley living in their cars as wildland firefighters because that's all they can afford. Can't afford to live in these mountain communities. Things have really changed from when Melissa and I started about kind of the cost of living, the pay, and then these fires are fire seasons are much longer than they used to be. They're almost year-round. They are year-round in some places. They're much more impactful in terms of acres burned, houses burned, resources affected. So it feels like when Melissa and I started in 2000 was the National Fire Plan. That was a big jump ahead. That's when the fuels program got started. That's when funding became available to make fuel breaks to help mitigate this wildfire spread and reduce some wildfire behavior. So that's been going on now for about 25 years. And then some legislation when President Biden was elected, that kind of made another push forward. So it feels like, maybe you go 3 steps forward and 2 back, but at least I do think that things are moving forward. And obviously it's been a kind of a big shift in kind of how we treat our firefighters, work-rest ratios, and also increasing numbers on hotshot crews. So somebody can, to 25, so instead of 20, so someone can peel off and go to a family's wedding or a funeral or whatever. Before it was like, no, the crew stays together, and if you leave, you're the bad guy because now the crew's not available for assignment. So I really feel like that has changed and it's becoming a more accommodating wildland fire service.
I will go back. So I wanted to talk a little bit, and I'm glad that Jolie brought that up about mental health. So mental health, is something that there's so many people that don't want to talk about it, right? Like, oh, I'm fine. Like, oh, are you okay? Because there's a lot of things that everybody goes through, across all spans of humanity, right? So, in speaking about firefighting alone, you go through some really crazy situations that the outcome is good because nobody got killed, right? But scary. Like where you're thinking that someone or yourself, aren't going to make it out. Yes, absolutely. And that is the reality of it. And so suicides among firefighters is more than the national average, and is creeping up to the percentage of veteran suicide. When you take a look at percentage of people, like when you take the data set and you put it to where it is equal. The wildland firefighter, and we're not talking about, dispatchers. This has happened in dispatch centers because the dispatchers are firefighters as well. Are they in 100% support function? Yes. They are not out there with fire, but is it intensely traumatic when something happens on a fire and all you're doing is hearing it through the radio? And you don't know what's happening, and you just talked to this person, you just gave directions, or you're not hearing something? Yes. So our dispatchers, it happens in our caches. So our caches, C-A-C-H-E, not the money, but where all of our inventory is, so those people are working super long hours, so when we're talking about fire people, it's over the whole gamut of people that support fire. But so at the district that I was the FMO at, this is a few years after I had left, we had a young man take his life not long after the season. And so, yes, there was probably other things going on in his life, but was this a contributing factor? Likely. And so, so that it's real in that mental health part is something that has been addressed, and addressed meaning, you know, like talked about. Just like, let's talk about it. You know, like, do you need help? Do you need a break? Do you need to just tap out for a week? You know, like, there's more and more people that are supervisors now that are understanding that. And you're like, I don't need to know, you know, like, your personal life is your personal life. Yep, we'll see you in a week. You know, like, that's happening more and more, and that never happened when I started. So that's a huge positive change, you know, of just acknowledging, you know, how tough the job is.
And I'll build on that a little bit more too. I know I think we're kind of running out of questions from you, but it's been important that managers have also been encouraged. Like, you take a vacation in the summer, and that never happened. I'm sure when Melissa and I started, no manager ever took a vacation in the summer. But now managers are taking vacations in the summer. They're modeling that behavior for the crews to take care of their mental health and you know, not let the job consume their entire life for, you know, now 4 to 6 months in some cases.
Great. So next question is not on the list that we had prepared, but if you were in charge of it all, everything, what would your prescription be? Or maybe just one. Just one.
Okay, if I was king for a day, I would fix the firefighter retirement program. So some of you may not know this, but if you're a primary firefighter, you get a little bit more money taken out of your paychecks because you get a little bit. You have to mandatory retirement at 57, and you can go at age 50 with 20 years of service, and but you cannot leave. You cannot leave primary or that firefighter retirement system for a day without losing it. And as a mom, I guess I just want to point out, and then Melissa's also a mom. So for women, this is a Women in Wildfire. I'll talk about this from a woman's perspective. You cannot leave that fire job for even a day, or you lose that retirement that you've paid into. And I really hope that that would be an aspect that gets fixed in the next few years, because that's a challenge for men as well. You can't, like, if you have family needs, or you just want to do a little bit of a career change for a little while to get some experience doing something else that eventually will benefit the Wildland Fire program, you lose it. So I feel like that's kind of I don't know, I've heard it called the golden handcuffs, and I mean, it's great that you get to retire early, and it's great that you get a little bit of extra pay, but it's not worth losing it all because you want to make a career shift, or because you have some other personal thing in your life that makes you want to kind of shift gears, at least for a little while. So that's one thing I would change.
Oh, I agree. I have twin daughters, and they were born in 2006. They just graduated high school. They're headed to college. And I was an FMO, a district fire management officer at the time. And so, actually, when they were born, I was assistant. And then I still did get I can't believe I competed for the job and got it. Just because I took 7 months off after the babies were born. But I used up my entire sick leave in order to do it. I had saved up sick leave my entire career up to that point, and I brought it down to almost zero so that I didn't lose my firefighter retirement. So, you know, but is that something that I was willing to give up, you know, in order to A, be a mom? Yes. And then B, keep my retirement? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so yeah, I agree with you there. I think if there's so many different levels, you know, to work with. If I was, well, where I am right now, what I have implemented with the people that work for me, you know, is that I love hiring people that are young in their careers, and whatever their family looks like, I don't care. I love hiring someone that has something outside of work. And then just help them be able to focus on that. Like, oh yeah, you know, you got something in August? oh my gosh, that's prime fire time, you know, like we're gonna cover it, you know, so yes, the answer is gonna be yes. So I look for the ways to say yes, because the work will always be there, but you know, your wife may not, your kids are gonna grow up, you know, your husband may not, you know, your mom and dad may not, you know, like all of the things, you know, that are really important to us as humans, you know, they may not. And so, so anyways, that's something that I've gotten to do in the position that I'm in right now, is always the ways to look to say yes, and then I'll figure it out, you know, like we'll get the coverage. There's probably more to go to that question, you know, like being queen for a day, you know, what could I do? But as far as like making a difference for the people, like I can't change, you know, the funding mechanisms, you know, like that kind of stuff. And do I spend some time thinking about it? Not anymore, you know, because I have no influence on that whatsoever. But what I do have influence is, you know, like how can I affect my microcosm? And that's the people I get to work with every day. And then, of course, everybody else that I get to work with, you know, that come in the doors. Because the Northern Rockies Training Center is right next to the Missoula Smoke Jump Center. And so that's where I get to work. And so we have people coming in all training season long, you know, coming in for courses. And that's my favorite time of year, you know, like to get to see all the people. Every single one of them could be me someday, you know, and I thought about that, you know, when I was growing up too, you know, like in fire, you know, like, oh, I'd like to be like her someday, or I worked with this really excellent IC, you know, on this fire, and I kind of chased him around a little bit, and I did eventually work for him at Alaska Fire Service because I really liked his style and I learned a lot from him. So I hope to have that influence on others. So I don't know if that's a change, but it's something that I've grown into.
Can you each tell us a little bit about your job today, you know, compared to when you started? So you're in very different roles than you started in.
So my day job is Geographic Area Training Rep, so I get to work with all agencies in the Northern Rockies. So Northern Rockies is North Dakota, Montana, and Northern Idaho. And so that's my area of influence. And then there's 7 of us throughout the country that are Geographic Area Training Reps. And we work together to promote fire training, incident management training, along with FEMA. So there's a lot of all hazards. So we respond to hurricanes. I was out there in New York and New Jersey for Superstorm Sandy. I've been to, I've been out of country a number of times on different assignments. I've been a division soup on a train wreck, you know, well, it was a train wreck. It was a train derailment, but that was bleeding over into the Clark Fork River outside of Missoula. You know, so my day job gets to work with all agencies, which is really fascinating because land management agencies each have a different mission. And our state agencies and our Fed agencies are very different, but the people aren't different at all. You know, we just have a different outfit that pays us, right? So that's what I get to. So on my day job, I work for all agencies and help promote even our volunteer firefighters. Where do people need? What kind of training do people need in order to get to where they want to be? In their career, because you know, career development, you know, is one part of it. The other part of it is our incident management teams and the qualifications that we need to have on the incident management teams to have them be able to respond to fires like this one up on the bench. So so there's all different that we've got different. Well, I could go on and on. You can hear that, right? Yeah. So that's what I get to do is support all of those functions, and then when I get to go out on fire, I work as a training specialist. I don't go out, you know, on the line anymore, but I do work with all sections on the incident management teams as well, and that still is my day job. It's just my fire job.
Yeah, what I do now actually is really interesting. I do get to provide feedback and technical assistance on legislation that hopefully moves the needle. So at the Office of Wildland Fire, it's a really small organization. It's about 40 of us, and we help oversee the budget and policy for the 4 fire management bureaus in the Department of the Interior, which is the Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, and Bureau of Indian Affairs. So our office is expected by Congress and the Office of Management and Budget that we know everything about the Wildland Fire Management Program in those 4 bureaus, and so we fake it sometimes. But we do have the opportunity to help influence through a budget and funding lens the things that we as a department find important, and we do that in coordination with the Forest Service. Obviously the Forest Service is the big player in wildland fire management, and Interior is a smaller player. And but we provide. We cannot lobby. Federal government employees cannot lobby, but we get asked often to provide technical assistance on legislation. And so I was doing that probably, I don't know, yesterday, reviewing legislation, providing like why this works or wouldn't work, or why this is a good idea or not a good idea, what we have capacity to implement or capacity and resources, and while this would be great, this would require additional funding to implement. So we are helping move the needle. And then this administration had a Wildfire Commission, part of that big funding slug of money. So I worked a lot with the Wildland Fire Management and Mitigation Commission that developed 156 recommendations to Congress and the President, and some of those are now finding their way into this legislation that I've been talking about. It morphs. It's not exactly what got written down, but it certainly has whatever political party's flavor and stamp on it. But we're getting asked to provide comments and feedback. So I know that right now is a really exciting time in wildland fire management. It's certainly on the minds of many. Last year was a quiet fire year in the United States. Canada was very busy, so there were some smoke impacts here, I know, and across the United States, which probably put a little bit of less urgency to some of these remedies and moving the program forward. But I suspect this year we're going to be a little bit busier, as we know, in our just down the street here. And it really feels like we're at a time now. I think we're going to be seeing some movement related to science, data, and technology, and some innovative practices there, and moving the ball forward related to that. So that's the kind of stuff that I work on at the department level. Like right now, we're deciding, is the Secretary's office ready for a fire briefing or not? And we decided, well, we'd wait till next Friday. So we were deciding last night whether we were going to do that today. When we said no, everyone's happy with the Interior fire situation. It's kind of more busy with the Forest Service, so we'll put that off one more week. And so we have to develop briefing papers and be ready to answer really silly questions from political appointees. And on both sides, every administration has silly questions, but that's our job to answer them, and it helps us promote the program and demonstrate a need for continued investment in the Wildland Fire Management Program.
All right, so thinking about, again, your careers, what's been your favorite part? What would you prefer to be spending all your time doing, and what's the part you could leave? Maybe we could all imagine that.
Yeah, okay. I can come up with a leaving pretty easily. The bureaucracy sometimes it gets very bureaucratic. It's very, as you can imagine, governmental. So that part gets a little old sometimes. And so especially, as we think about an election coming up and how and the other part is continuing resolutions in terms of Congress not passing a budget. That gets so old. There's so much time and energy that goes into that, preparing for a lapse in appropriation. I guess some of that is just I've told the less experienced people who get super frustrated by it, this is what you get paid to do. It's just part of the job. And so at first it was really frustrating for me, but now I've kind of used to it. But I could leave it.
I think my favorite part of the job, and it has not wavered, is I love supervision. I love being able to hire people. I love their first day. And I also love their last day. But not for the same reasons. Like when I got to hire crews for, say, the Sule district, I hired the lookouts, and we had hand crews, we had engines, So everybody came on, and it was first day is fun because there's so much vibrant energy, of the young people coming on, and like looking forward to what the year looks like, and we've got all these projects planned in between, fires, and then the last day is equally as fun, is because everybody's going to do their thing, like because firefighting, while in other places of the world it is, or excuse me, the country, it can be year-round. It's definitely not in North Dakota, northern Idaho, or Montana, or or actually probably southern Idaho either. So, so our folks get laid off, and so say end of November, when our burning is done and our work is done, the folks are sometimes, and I take this, like there's some people that take that really hard because they've been supported by all their crew members and have had a really good season, and then it's really lonely, afterwards. So a support mechanism afterwards is always good, on the mental health aspect. But the last day is typically really fun because people are launching to whatever they do. We've had people that go to Southeast Asia and stay there all winter. Like they've made so much money and they're not going to college and they're just traveling the world and having fun. Some of them go to other jobs, to like South America, or Central America. It's, so it's kind of neat to live that through, the young people too. So I have always loved that. And while the folks that I hire now are not seasonal, they're year-round, but I still love the supervision part. I also really hate the supervision part, and only because not everybody has the same work ethic and level of honesty, and you get that in every workplace. And so we too, in fire and the government do. And so, so I love supervision, and I can also leave it, but it's only with very few through my whole career. Like 3 through my whole career, I could say, boy, I wish I never supervised you. But everybody else, I have really enjoyed getting to know.
Favorite that you want to share? Or no?
Favorite part of your job? It's not the bureaucracy.
No, the bureaucracy is not my favorite part. I don't know. I love it all. I really do love my job, and I really feel so fortunate to have had the career that I've had. I've got to live in some amazing places and do some amazing things, and so very grateful.
So the last scheduled question that we have is, can you share any exciting stories or experiences, the good or the bad? We love a nail biter. Anything you got for us?
I think Melissa's probably got way more of these than I do.
I do have a lot. It's a super exciting time, and it's because the outcome was good, all right? But it's also a very real part of firefighting. So we're in northern New Mexico, and this is 1994. This is before Storm King happened. That was July 6th. And they had a really terrible, the whole Southwest had a terrible fire season. And this is back, so now firefighters are out for 14 days. That's it, and it can get extended, but it's 14 days, and then they have 3 to more days off. But back then, so we're talking, this is 1994, we would be out 21 days, and we could R&R in place, Silver City, New Mexico, and then go for another 21. So really all you do is eat, do laundry, at a laundromat, and, maybe take in a movie, but sleep through the whole thing because it's in the old movie theaters, where you could just stay and sleep, because it's cool. And anyways, so we had just gotten off on R&R, and we went to this fire called the Coffee Pot. We had, there's 3 hotshot crews that were working this line, and we were leapfrogging, which means you're digging, your saws are cutting the line, you're coming up behind digging, and when a crew bumps into the line that you started, then they leapfrog ahead of you, and they give you some space, so that's just the order of operations. And it was steep, it was super dry, and it wasn't bad digging. I don't remember, like the work was the work. It's just hard all the time, but it wasn't particularly hard. And so a crew was going to leapfrog us, and it happened to be the El Criso from California, and they went down down a hill. And they had just gotten out, and this is back in the day, so on the hotshot crews now, most every person on a hotshot crew has a radio. So there's communications. They're communicating with aviation, the helicopters, they're communicating, you know, with each other, and they're communicating with operations back at camp. And so back then, there was only 4 radios on a crew of 20 people. So there wasn't necessarily good communication. So, so the crew, the El Carrizo had gone down, and then the Globe hotshots went down in front of them. And we stayed up because we were taking a break, and then we were going to go down, you know, in front of them. It's still kind of early in the day. Anyways, so fire started boiling up out of the bottom. Well, how can you tell that fire's boiling up out of the bottom? It's brown smoke that's coming out. You know, it's not just white puffy smoke, you know. I mean, it's coming up and it's got lift, which means, you know, that the air is unstable enough that it's allowing it to come up, you know, and rise. So that heat is rising and it's down below you. That is not a good place to be, especially mid-morning, because it's only going to get hotter and drier. And so we hung back. We're like, I don't think we're going to go down there. And so then we tried to get a hold of El Carrizo and Globe, couldn't. El Carrizo comes piling up out of the bottom, and the last of them to come out, they're shaps, saw shaps. So we have protective shaps, which are thick Kevlar that cover the sawyer's legs. So because every now and again you do, you know, nick your leg, it's terrible when it happens. So I'm making light of it, but it is terrible. But that's why you wear Kevlar or saw shaps. And so their saw shaps were turned around behind them. So they took some heat down low, right? Mm-hmm. So, and they were running up the steep slope. Well, guess who was in front of them? Globe. And they did not come up, and they didn't answer their radios either. And so we were, you know, like just waiting to see whether or not they were going to come up, and we were like kind of preparing ourselves that something really terrible just happened, and or was happening, and there was no way, there was nothing that we could do because we didn't have any communication with them. And I'm a crew member. I was a squad boss at the time, so I did have a radio, so I could hear that there was no communication. And so it's now really smoky because now the smoke is starting to lean over us and collapse over us, which means now fire embers are coming up, you know, and kind of dropping over us. And so El Carrizo just kind of took off a little bit further back up into the black. And Globe, and we were in a good spot, and we weren't tired either, you know, because we had just taken a break and watered up, you know, and all that jazz. And so, you know, like we were in a quandary of, you know, what to do. Well, then some Globe hotshots started coming up out of there. And it was, you know, it was just, we were so exuberant, you know, that they came up because we were thinking they weren't going to come up. But then you realize that there was only 4 or 5 of them. And then there's 15 others that are down there. And so it was this push and pull of emotion, you know, so then the Globe, so they came up and we were cheering them, you know, like everybody was like so happy to see them, and then it just like we all descended into this pit because we knew that there was more crew members that were not up yet. And so then like 2 or 3 came up, you know, so we went through this, and I can't even tell you how long that happened. The entire crew came out. The bottom 2 did have burns on the backs of their legs, but not, I mean, they got airshipped out, but not life-threatening. And, but just that whole thing, you know, of like, you're so scared that you're going to have to go on a recovery operation and not a rescue operation. And so, but the outcome was fine. Everybody came out. But I think that was one of the there's more than that, you know, times, but one of those times that you're so exhausted. Yes, the work was hard, it was hot, you know, that kind of stuff, but you're so mentally drained that we just, you know, nobody engaged because we didn't know what was going on below us. We pulled back into the black and sat the rest of the day. The Globe gathered up and hiked up to the helispot, and they didn't, because of the fire activity, they didn't get out of there until the next morning, very next morning, because it was cool enough then, because we were really high up, and so the helicopters couldn't operate at that elevation and that heat to be able to get the whole crew out. So then they camped up at the helispot and then got taken out the next morning. But all of us just, I mean, you were exhausted, but you couldn't sleep because of the emotional part of that. And so that's one of the things, that's just the reality, of working fires. There are so many times where you're high-fiving and loving what you do, and like, God, that was a great day. And you can't believe some of the things you get to see, like aspen groves that are just phenomenal, like in that area. There's, and then there's other things, with the job that, are not so phenomenal, but equally as real. And it happens to crews every year. So, and it's not just in California, or not, it happens all over the country. So it can happen back east too, in Michigan and Minnesota.
Well, mine's not nearly as exciting, but it was fun for me. There was a Cerro Grande fire, and I was trying to remember when that was, late 90s.
2000.
It's 2000, okay.
Oh,
you're on, yeah, of course. It was a prescribed fire that escaped. It's probably one in New Mexico, probably the most destructive wildfire in New Mexico at that time. Has now been, there are new records there. So it was, the Park Service started the fire as a controlled burn, as a prescribed fire to kind of reduce wildfire risk, to be doing all the right things. And Paul Gleason, I also know Paul. He was kind of, in charge of that at the time, and he was a grad student colleague of mine. I figured if you named things that he would know, so I figured you know him. We probably know like a lot, like all the same people. Yeah. Right, LCES. But anyway, so I was working at a heli base, and the helicopter reminded me of it, and but I was dispatching aircraft on this fire, and there was a new fire that had started. And when you have an ongoing fire and you have all this aircraft, sometimes you're assigned initial attack to go put out new fires or go investigate new fire starts. And there was a new fire that got started. So, and by this time, we had probably the Cerro Grande fire was pretty much under control. Maybe not all the way. So there's a lot of air assets on this fire. And so they were like, hey, can you go check out this new start? And so I, got the helicopter going, and then it was an area where there were a lot of people. There were a lot of ranches in New Mexico. This is outside of Los Alamos area, and I remember they decided they needed to go evacuate these ranch homes, and there was no time to do it in a vehicle. So we had helicopters. So I was dispatching helicopters to ranches that were landing in people's yards, essentially, helping people evacuate. Anyway, that was kind of hairy, and there was no bad outcomes there, but it was a lot of excitement and quick thinking, and like, oh, well, how can we do this? Well, we got all these air assets. This is how we're going to do this. And so just dispatching them and talking to everybody on the radio, and I remember being like, this was kind of an exciting day.
All right, so we're going to open it up to the audience if anyone has questions for folks here. We'll start there and go this way.
Oh, great. You both mentioned something about how fortunate you've been to be in this career, and I think all of us sitting here feel equally fortunate to have spent the last hour listening to you. This is a wonderful, wonderful presentation. The thing that surprises me, so I'm going to circle back to it, is that you haven't spoken, except for one instance, about your experience, which is long, of being women in a profession that certainly didn't welcome you in 1989 or 1990. And yet, you have not only made your way and become great leaders in your field, but you've also watched a new generation of women. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about the then and the now, as women, and also how many more women are actually in the profession now? I don't know if you know those numbers, but I'd love to know.
I can't speak to the data of how many women, are in it. I can speak to, yeah, I was just stubborn and wanted to pay for college, and it was terrible. I will say, I don't want my daughters to fight fire. I'll say that. And so they're 18, they can this summer, and I have never encouraged them to work fires. I have, as early as, or as recent as 4 years ago, supervised a Type 2 IA crew. So a Type 2 is not a hotshot crew. They have less qualification standards for the hierarchy of the crew boss, the assistant crew boss, and squad bosses than a hotshot crew does. And they are an initial attack crew, which means they can be broken up into groups of 5, to take smaller fires. And so while we did hire women, on the crew, some of the behavior that I saw wasn't too far from what I experienced. And that was one of the crew bosses that I supervised that's no longer with the outfit. I guess I'm glad I supervised him, because he's no longer with the outfit. So, so as far as the change goes, I think it's, I'm not sure how different it is in my area that I've seen. I talked to a lot of women that have continued to move up, and the choices that they've had to make about resigning because their particular supervisor is not supportive of them wanting to start a family. And they've made that choice, so, and that's as recent in the last 10 years. So, so how many more women are in? I haven't seen a huge influx of women, come in. So, for example, at the training center, and I always pay attention to this. So we put on classes that are for burn boss, and then operations. So those are very operations centric qualifications. And the last time, this is almost 10 years ago, we put on an operations section chief class. There was 3 women in it, and I knew all 3 of them. They were all my age. We've put it on since. There's no women. The last time we put on a burn boss class, there were 2 women, and I knew both of them. And then a division supervisor class, and we put on the burn boss class and division supervisor class every year. So I pay attention to operationally, in those operations classes, how many women are in there. And if we have 1 woman, that's about where it's at for division supervisor. Are there qualified division supervisors out there? Yes, there are. Are there qualified operations section chief women out there? Yep, there sure are. We have incident commanders that are women. And so, so they're there, but I don't see an influx, coming up in the earlier career ranks.
Yeah, and because of my experience, I was already a grad student when I started doing fire. I kind of a little bit avoided the lower GS grade levels, and I had a lot of support from males throughout my career. And but I do remember going to a meeting, and I was with my boss at the time, and it's fire program management, one of the first offerings, at least in Region 2, and it was like a 3-day class or something, and I'd been there, it was like the 3rd day, and someone was like, so, that's so sweet that you're here with your dad. And I was like, oh no, I'm not here with my dad. I'm here on my own right. And but anyway, so and then I did get when I had my child, I got when I went back to work, it was a little bit like, what are you doing here? Why aren't you home with your daughter? Got a little bit of that. And like Melissa said, I tried to get the numbers. Turns out, like, I can't actually touch the numbers my own self, so I have to ask for help from others, and I wasn't able to get the statistics in time for this, but anecdotally I was just checking with some people in my office. The numbers are not there, but I do think that some of these workforce reforms that are paying attention to firefighter well-being, mental health, physical health, I really hope, and maybe some of the changes about the retirement system that I think are particularly impactful for women or caregivers. I really hope that some of those changes will help, but I have not seen it. You know, it seems like it's sort of maintained or maybe even gotten less.
You said that you couldn't use a respirator fighting a fire. So that small question, how come? Larger question, what's happened and is happening to safety gear for the fighters?
So the question is about respirator use and safety gear for wildland firefighters. I can't imagine having something strapped to my face and having my eyebrows being burned by flames. So, and just the physical aspect of that, it's different than a structure fire. You are swinging a tool, you are hiking, you are just that movement, like you are sweating. Men, you have facial hair, you know, impacting the connection of that respirator on your face. So it, you know, you have not, you can't, you're filthy, you're dirty, you know, you can't clean the equipment. I think something's going to happen, though. I think we know too much now about potential smoke impacts, and so even like some of the tactics that Melissa talked about, like, you know, stepping off the line, letting the fire burn to natural breaks, like those kinds of things will save, will be or help from our actions that will help or make awareness about firefighter health and safety a little bit better. Since I started, there's been new fire shelters. You know. Not a lot in other kinds of PPE, but I don't know, maybe you've got some things you want to add to that.
Yeah, so all the PPE is personal protective equipment. You got to think that the firefighters are carrying all of it on their back, including their tools, and so water is a part of it, right? You know, so you got to have what, 40 pounds or less, and you're working with 40 pounds on your back. You know, so it's you see so many firefighters with bad backs, you know, that are like my age and older, you know, like because it's hard work and you're swinging a tool and you've got that ungainly weight, you know, that's on your back. I would say that the fire shelters have gone through a number of different iterations. So a fire shelter is it's a last resort. And so in that example of a day with the globe, almost each one of the globe hotshots had deployed their fire shelters. So they had them wrapped around them as they're hiking up, you know, because either as a heat shield or they fully deployed because they were burned over down below. So, so they have gotten better. They are heavier. And like in my pack and where it sits on me, it's below my butt. So when I'm hiking, it is really uncomfortable. And it's just because I've got a short torso, you know, so it's just the way that it is, you know. But is it, if I got in a bad situation and I pulled that, I'd have a better chance of survival. They have proven, you know, even the old ones, you know, in 1990 on a number, my first project fire where fire shelters were deployed, some lived because they deployed their fire shelters. So they were proven to be a good piece of equipment back then, and they've just improved on them, you know, over the years, you know, with the technology and trying to keep them light as well. But they're 7 pounds. So that's a lot.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Hadn't weighed one.
Are medical people part of the crews that go in?
Are medical people part of the crews? And
Yeah.
so on many of the crews, we have EMTs. On one of the hotshot crews that I was on, we had a paramedic, and which came in handy when one of the guys was leaning against a vehicle, and the vehicle got struck by lightning, so the lightning went through his body. Yeah, so to have that paramedic there was saved the guy's life, no doubt about it. So there's line EMTs, so there's people that go out that are out there only for their qualification. So they're not on the crew, they're not expected to dig line or saw line. You know, they are there, you know, to be a rapid response to a situation on the line. So yes, and then within the incident management, one of the sections has medical unit underneath it. And then within that medical unit, it's EMTs. Oftentimes there's paramedics, you know, that are there as well. And but many of the crews, you know, it's very encouraged. And we would pay, so Forest Service, I'm sure Department of Interior agencies as well, we would pay folks to go through an EMT certification, a wilderness EMT certification, so that there is someone to be able to provide, you know, the first responder, you know, for medical emergencies. Yes.
One of you mentioned that you were on the path of GIS and stepped away to get into the wilderness ranger portion. How much of this do you see overlapping now in the career field? Is it tracking more so forest growth patterns, or are you actually tracking fires with the program?
Yeah, so the question is about, well, let's see, I'm not exactly sure what the question is, so I'm going to repeat what I heard, and then you can help me out. So the question was, asking about, I had started in the GIS field, and how that relates back to wildland fire management today.
Yes.
Yeah, oh, it's a lot. So when I started in fire, I had a degree in geography with a professional certificate in GIS and remote sensing, and like I said, it was before computer mice were invented.
Right.
So when I actually started, when mice were invented, I was obsolete. So, but the knowledge is there. And at first, like when we first started doing this, the fire behavior models were not spatial. So you would go, like, it's this fire right now. I know they're running all kinds of fire behavior models right now to figure out where is this fire going to go, when, and how big, and what's the flame length going to be, etc. And they're using, at the time, you use static data, so it wasn't geospatially connected. So you just guess, oh, it's trees, I put trees in, the wind is this, I put this in, and we figure the slope is this, and so it's pretty basic. But now there's a lot of data about the landscape that is used to develop those kinds of models, to do a lot of pre-planning, all kinds of GIS data used for a location, like where are the resources on this fire, where are they at any one moment, where are the aircraft flying, and so people are making sure that they're not crashing into each other. So there's been a huge technology advance with GIS and its application to all kinds of parts of the wildland fire program, in terms of before the fire, after the fire, during the fire. There's a lot of data now. We spend a lot more time and energy on post-fire impacts. That's a little bit of what I do as well. And having really good information about the landscape, and then how that fire burns on the landscape. So that's also spatially derived. You now get burn severity mapping. You know, this area burned really intensely, this area was less intense. Okay, this has got this slope, we know exactly where this is. Oh gosh, this community is downstream of this, like, uh-oh, we better do some things to stabilize that site. So GIS is, I think, integral, and certainly is a huge game changer in how we've managed fires before, during, and after they occur.
Knowing that typically it seems like with Forest Service, but particularly, let's say, fire, people come in at a younger age, they work their way up, you're not only increasing in your GS pay, but your experience levels. If you're not seeing as many women getting in, are there places for women coming into it later, after kids, or later in careers, or swapping careers and coming, are there places for people, men and women, but women, to come into fire work when they're not at a level to be out in the field?
Yes, and that's where we need dispatchers. So we do not have an abundance of dispatchers. So our dispatch centers are interagency. There's state employees, there's BLM employees, there's Park Service employees, Forest Service employees, and there are not an abundance of dispatchers. So we put on the classes every year for that reason. And so, yes, that is a place, you know, to come in. And I'm not saying it's easy work because, you know, so I'd much rather be moving around. If I'm sitting at a console, you know, and you're needing to pay attention, you know, you're dispatching aircraft, you know, or you're on IA desk, or, you know, like, it is an intense job. And it's also sedentary, which, you know, isn't good for you for another reason, right? You know, but it's a very intense job. However, that is a place where, yes, you know, we would need more people. I would say in GIS work, for the mapping, you know, providing the maps, you know, using that skill to build the maps for the teams, because each of the teams brief off of maps. You know, we now QR code them, or we can do it a lot of different ways, but those maps have to be built by someone. And so there's skill sets, you know, that you can come in, you know, not in your early years, you know, when you want to beat up your body and be told what to do and not, you know, complain about it, you know, that kind of stuff. Where you complain with your buddies, you know, instead of to the boss. Yeah, I think those are two places, you know, where that would be, and, you know, and a little bit more life experience, you know, would come in awful handy there too.
I live in Virginia. We have a lot of volunteer firefighters. Do you have that here in Idaho?
So the question is about volunteer firefighters?
Yes.
And yes, so volunteer fire departments, many of them have a wildland fire engine that they work with, you know, that's a part of their department. And so our volunteer fire departments are under the states, and it would be back east as well, you know, so they're paid by the states to go out on wildland fires. And so an engine is an engine, you know, they're providing water. Then the leap is to get to the wildland component. You know, so the safety part, you know, but the hose lays, you know, the delivery of water mechanisms, that's all the same as what they do, you know, for a structure fire. And so that is not a hard leap. And yes, the volunteer fire departments are, in Montana, they're definitely, and northern Idaho, an integral part of the fire community. And I will say, so I was just back in New York working with the FDNY. So they, you know, the structure fire departments that are the professional fire departments, they have incident management teams. They come out west, you know, and work fires, you know, with us. I've trained with them and trained them, you know, so they too are an excellent resource, you know, of being able to help us, you know, in our western fires, as well as then when we go back and help them with stuff like Hurricane Sandy. That's where I kind of got involved with that, because that was a whole new thing for them as well. So, but incident response, it's all incident, you know, and so those skills that volunteer fire departments have, yep, they're definitely used.
Liesl, did you have a question?
Well, just quickly, you said you wouldn't want your daughters to go into it. Is that because it's a hard, dangerous job, or because you'd like them to receive more respect?
I would like them to use their brains.
Okay.
And they have big brains. And I think when I was 18, I was really dumb. And I was just, and I'm not putting myself down, you know, but tell me to do something or work hard or do that kind of stuff, you know, and I would just do it. You know, I mean, that's what, I mean, you have to not think when you're on a hay crew, right? You know, like, that wasn't brilliant work. But is it necessary work? Absolutely. And that's kind of what I loved about fire. But some of those experiences, you know, that I had, I wouldn't want that on my daughters. You know, so I want a better life for them. And I'm not saying that my life, you know, growing up in fire has been bad, because it hasn't. It served me. You know, they need to live their own lives. And I want them to use their big, beautiful brains.
That's a positive note to leave it on. Thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. There will be a little bit of time. If you have any other questions or want to chat with them directly, you can. But of course, if you've ever been to a Foreman lecture series, you know I am not done. So a few things to let you know about At this moment, the Redfish Visitor Center is closed until further notice, and so we will not be having our regular programming happening out there, like our evening program that I would typically plug tomorrow. So stay tuned. We'll try to keep you updated on our social media accounts so that you know when we are back out there doing what we're doing. Our next Forum and Lecture Series program is in 2 weeks on July 26th. Krista Wilmerth is joining us, and she'll be talking about foraging in the Mountain West. So if you would like to join us, 5 p.m. right here, July 26th, we would love to have you. Thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you have a great evening.